Welcome to The Problem With, where I, Benny the Comicstorian, come up with a simple little thing and then turn it into a nitpick that I can argue about for roughly about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I can tell you the positive spin on it because I'm not a negative person, but you guys won't click positive sounding titles. Today we're going to talk about Gen V and The Boys. I'm going to tell you my opinions on it, what I think is going on with it, why we don't put it here on Comicstorian, though that's going to take 2 seconds. And I'm also going to say what I actually legitimately think the problem with The Boys and Gen V is going to be. Today's episode is brought to you by a Kickstarter for a comic book that I'm really excited for and I really want to support. That comic book is Zorro. You guys remember Sean Gordon Murphy, the guy that created the White Knight universe for Batman, the universe that we all love and read and we're super excited for? Well, he has the rights to Zorro, and he is telling a brand new story in the Zorro universe approved by the Zorro owners. I don't know if it's the creators, but the owners of Zorro. And he's launched a Kickstarter yesterday, so you need to get over there and be a part of it if you want to see comic books succeed. If you're tired of Batman stories and Spider-Man stories, then you need to tell people that you want something else, and Zorro is a great segue. Zorro, if you don't know, is a character from like forever ago. I watched the show when I was a kid, and it's basically Batman before Batman existed. You know how Batman's in an alleyway with his parents dead? They were watching Zorro. I'm not joking. Zorro is basically Batman, but like Hispanic Batman? There was a movie with Antonio Banderas about Zorro. So once again, check out Zorro. The Kickstarter link will be down below. Now let's get into what the problem with The Boys and Gen V is. So let's start this video with my opinions of Gen V. At the time of this video, I have watched the first 3 episodes, 3 episodes have come out at this time. 4 comes out tomorrow. I'm filming this on a Thursday. I don't think I need to watch 4 to give you my opinion. I'm a huge fan of The Boys television show. I'm a huge fan of Gen V. I think Gen V is a great way to do it. The Boys as a franchise, in my opinion, failed as a comic book. It tried too hard to give you that shock value. It was a good book. It did sell, but it was never up there in my list of like, this is incredible. You all need to read The Boys. Another shock value book I used to read, and I don't anymore, I don't even know if it's still going, is a book called Crossed, where instead of having a zombie virus, there was a virus that made you do the worst thing humanly possible in your own mind, sexual or violent or whatever. And The Boys and Crossed, I both feel had an issue as a comic book. And I feel like this is a potential problem with the show, but we're going to get to that. As a comic book, The Boys and Crossed, I feel like they kept trying to one-up themselves. They were successful because they did things that nobody else did. The Boys basically deconstructed the Justice League and told you, okay, so what if they were all just
bad people?
Dan can censor that. He can have a lot of fun with some censoring some stuff in this one. But it basically boils down to what if they were? What if they were the worst people known to mankind? And then the story goes from there. Cross is also kind of in that same vein where the story started out with like, what if people were stuck doing the worst things they could ever possibly think of? Well, then you have to start thinking of worse and worse things. That's what happened with The Boys. The Boys just gradually got worse and worse. It felt like it was being over the top for the sake of being over the top, as opposed to being something to propel the story. And this is the issue that happened with the comic, which is why I don't think the comic ever hit the levels of notoriety that the show is hitting. Now, The Boys as a TV show, I've been enjoying since season 1, since it first dropped. Because when the first season dropped, it was 2019. We had literally just wrapped up the Endgame situation. We had just gone through an entire 10-year process of the MCU bringing us the greatest heroes that you've ever seen on the screen. DC kind of floundering over their own finish line of getting to Justice League. And we had just gone through so many superhero flicks where everything kind of boiled down to the same thing. We have an origin story. We have someone from their past coming back to be the villain. The heroes would then battle against it. They would rise above and become a greater hero than before, throw in a bunch of jokes and quips, and it felt like the exact same movie over and over and over. That's what's known as the superhero bubble bursting, because ever since then, people are like, well, people aren't as interested in the superhero world. I don't think that's it. I think we've made some very poor decisions on writers and directors and topics to actually cover, but I feel like this is an entire different video talking about the superhero bubble to get to that. But The Boys, I think, came out at a great time. 2019, right after we just got done with these superheroic movies. You then get a show about what if the Justice League was terrible. And they did a great job of it. They carried over a lot of the themes from the comic books, but they did a good job of cleaning it up. A lot of the stuff that happened in The Boys was for shock value, but it was shock value that would propel the story. And I feel like that is something that we are forgetting season 2, season 3, and now in Gen V. Now, seasons 1, 2, and 3, I've never talked much about here on Comicstorian. I have on our podcast channel, absolutely, which I'll link down below, but I have not talked about it here. I felt all 3 were very good. I felt 3 was kind of trying to kill time. If you didn't know, within the comic at that point, Homelander's kind of not really a part of very much, but they've kind of already gone in their own direction and broken away from the comic book. So 1 and 2 were great. 3, I felt, was like, where are we going with this? But you could easily clean this up in 4 and 5. And for the record, I loved Soldier Boy and Jensen Ackles. As much as I think season 3 was kind of like spinning its feet and kind of holding the plot with Homelander and I can't remember her name. It doesn't matter really because we're not talking about the show today. But the plot with Homelander and the boys and all that stuff, I felt like it got put on hold for Soldier Boy, but it was still fine because Soldier Boy was such an incredible character. Now we get to Gen V. The show went on hiatus after season 3. I think from what I'm gathering, Gen V was supposed to come out a lot sooner, but stuff like COVID and other issues caused delays. Someone was telling me the other day that the character of Marie shows up in the dossier files in one of the other seasons of The Boys, meaning that they were thinking about this that early on. Gen V, I think, is a great show. I actually think it kind of feels to me like season 1 of The Boys, where we don't really know what to expect and we're in this universe. But what I really like that Gen V is doing is they're taking a lot of the tropes that you would expect within a CW Riverdale high school show, and they're putting a boys spin on it. Every character has their own trauma, their own issues, but they're dealing it with superpowers. We have the character of Jordan, who's a non-binary character. They have the ability to change back and forth between male and female on a whim, and therefore they're going the non-binary route. We're exploring the parents who reject the non-binary child and want to misgender them, but we're doing it from a boy's point of view, which I find very interesting, and it's a different take on it. Because when Jordan can go from male to female and the father only wants to refer to Jordan as he, it's a different dynamic when Jordan can literally turn into a woman. The same thing goes with the character that you would normally have that is self-harming within a CW-style teen show. Our character Marie's entire power basis comes out of manipulating blood, and so she has to cut herself to do that. She has to cut herself to be accepted by the people around her because she has to cut herself to do her powers and use them. So she has to self-harm to be accepted by everyone around her. It's a different dynamic than just having that situation where someone feels they need to self-harm so that they have their own, like the motivation of I have to do it to be accepted and see it in action is very interesting. Just like the character of Cricket, who's dealing with body dysmorphia issues and dealing with an eating disorder, but you spin it into her power. When she throws up, she shrinks. That is her power. When she eats, she gets bigger, literally. So to take that dynamic and then throw an eating disorder on top of that is a wonderful way to explore it, because we're getting what some people would call tropes in a teen drama. Because whenever you watch things like Euphoria, which I also watch, everyone has these issues. Everyone has one of these issues. And I don't know about you, but when I went to public high school, not everyone in my friend group had one of the issues. You knew people with these issues, but it wasn't like, let's make a circle of friends and each of us pick a problem and we're all going to go through it. That's just kind of what happens with a lot of these TV shows. But The Boys is putting a fun spin on it. Fun being a subjective term to use for this, but you know what I'm saying. And I love it. The show's great. The characters are great. The characters are the way they're growing, the way we're exploring their personalities, the issues, how they're handling their issues. There's more characters than the ones I just mentioned, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what we're looking at with Gen V. It kind of reminds me of X-Men or My Hero Academia, but with very problematic issues being cycled into the entire thing. And for the record, not everyone has an issue like this that is like a front and center issue. We also have the character of, I can't remember his name. He's very important, which is funny. but he's dealing with, he just lost his best friend, and his dad thinks he should be on the 7, which is the Justice League of the Boys universe. And he's dealing with, am I good enough while trying to be a hero, but his dad wants him to be a different type of hero. And we also have the woman who has the ability to manipulate everyone around her, and whether or not she should be doing that, and what is she doing, and what happened with her parents, and things like that. All of these characters are great. I love the show. The budget is super high, as you would expect with this. The CG doesn't look like CG. There's a lot of references to the boys. All the characters are in the boys. The classic characters like Soldier Boy and Lamplighter and all these individuals. They're the different schoolhouses within this universe. I love it. It's a great take on it. And overall, if you like the boys, I recommend Gen V. But here's where the problem with the boys and Gen V comes in. Does anyone remember the Walking Dead craze? Bet you weren't expecting me to bring that up in a boys discussion. So The Walking Dead came out, and it was on AMC, and it was pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable for like a PG-13 zombie thing. But people were watching it, as we discovered later, because of it pushing the boundaries. Shooting people and they'd have blood. Zombies were gross and grotesque. Things were getting over the top, and we were doing bigger and bigger set pieces and bigger grotesque things every single season. Every season almost felt like it was trying to one-up itself with how much blood and guts they could get away with and how far could they push it. And this is not me bringing this up. I've actually read quite a few articles and studies of the downfall of The Walking Dead. Now, if you're watching Walking Dead, you're probably like, what do you mean the downfall? We just had like 4 spin-offs and there's a movie coming out. What I'm saying is the downfall of The Walking Dead is not that it died and no one watches it, but it did have a peak viewer count, and that peak viewer count afterwards has never been hit again in the Walking Dead universe. That doesn't mean that the series didn't continue onward and it's not popular and there's not an entire spin-off franchise coming out of The Walking Dead right now, but it does mean that it did hit a peak popularity. That peak was season 7. Every season, The Walking Dead will try to one-up the ante and do a bigger set piece, bigger problems, bigger grotesque guts and explosions and stuff like that. Season 7 is when Negan took a bat to Glenn's head. And on screen, they had Glenn's eyeball hanging out of his head to be the big shock value of the season. There are studies that showed that was the moment The Walking Dead pushed it too far. That was the highest viewer count they ever had. And there are studies that show that people stopped watching The Walking Dead following that. Now, I actually lost interest in The Walking Dead about season 6 because the concept of The Walking Dead, I feel, needed to go somewhere, and to make it work for a never-ending show, it kind of wasn't going somewhere in my opinion, but that's a different opinion on The Walking Dead. The actual viewership drop was that season 7 scene with Negan beating the tar out of Glenn. And the reason is that it was notated that a lot of people finally dropped off of The Walking Dead. That the overall opinion of the public was that The Walking Dead had pushed itself too far, had gotten too bloody, too grotesque, and was willing to show too much. And your average viewer didn't want to watch somebody's eyeball dangling out of their head while they were like crawling on the ground trying to get to their wife. It was just too much. Now, the boys came out of the gate with some pretty insane and over-the-top scenes, and pretty much. And I got a good list here. This is not all of them. I just Googled online for the wildest scenes from boys seasons 1 through 3 to go what I'm going for. But we start with Robin exploding. A-Train's running through the thing, and we get a bloody mist, and she dies. And then in episode 3, we had Pop Claus sitting on her landlord's head because she was trying to get low on the rent. And then when she
finishes,
Dan's gonna have so much fun censoring this episode.
Finishes.
She crushes his head. We have the dolphin scene with the Deep, where he's like alluding to sexual acts with the dolphin and stuff like that. All of this is pretty over the top, and it set a nice standard for the boys, where you're just like, okay, this is that kind of show. It's going to be pushing the limits a little bit. Also on this list, and we got to give a mention to this, Laser Baby, where he's just shooting the baby's eyes around. That was awesome. But then things start to get a little more over the top. Season 2, we have the woman like digging into the Deep's gills. That was kind of like, what the hell's going on there? We have the time that the boat went through a whale and everyone just gets covered in blood, guts, and like whale stuff. We have the scene in which
Homelander loves himself a lot.
Yeah, that was a whole thing in itself. And once again, none of this was like, oh my God, what is happening? But you can tell that we're amping it up a little. The budget went a little bit higher. The blood and guts could get a little over the top. They know that this is what people expect from the boys. There's also Mother's Milk battling against, I guess his name is Love Sausage, but the guy who can extend his
Sausage.
into strangling. So we're starting to get a little over the top. We're just like, what is happening? What is going on? And then the ending scene where everyone's head explodes. The budget's higher, the blood and guts are higher. We're getting there. We then move into season 3, where a lot of people, and even if you don't watch The Boys, heard about this scene, which is why they do this, so that they amp it up a little bit more, and then everyone talks about it. But in the first episode of season 3, this guy is having sexual relations with another man, and he
Enters his tunnel.
and then expands because he sneezed, blowing up the guy's
Little buddy.
and him, and it's a big mess. This is also the scene in which the Deep, I think, has to eat Timothy, which is the octopus that had sex with him and his wife. Also weird. So he has to eat it while Timothy is pleading for his life. That's a different kind of what the hell, what's going on kind of scene. And it just continues to ramp up with there. Oh, and how can I forget Herogasm? The entire sequence in which all the characters went to a superhero
Gathering.
and that was just over the top. But once again, Herogasm got tweeted out. It got a hashtag. Exploding
Wang.
got a hashtag. By the way, that was a fun day to figure out what Exploding
Wang.
was referencing. And now we go to Gen V. And in the first 3 episodes of Gen V, we've now got what I just mentioned earlier. We've got the gender dysmorphia, I guess would be the best way to put it, situation. Because Jordan's whole, I can be male, I can be female, but I'm non-binary situation. We got the girl cutting herself. We've also got the girl vomiting and being naked. But in the first 3 episodes of Gen V, we've had Cricket get shrunk down so that she can
Do consensual adult things that not everyone is into, so his member.
look bigger to the girl that's like Thumbelina. We have Marie is blowing up her family and shooting shards of blood into them while slamming people around. We have Golden Boy literally just explodes, and then the characters find bits and pieces of him in the cement for the next couple of episodes. We have Cricket crawls through a brain and comes up covered in blood because she's in a pool of blood. My question is, how far is Gen V going to go? Because in the first 3 episodes, I think we're already on par with all the seasons of The Boys. We've already done all that. So where are we going to go next? At what point is The Boys and Gen V going to have its Glenn eyeball hanging out moment? At what point are we not going to watch it anymore because it just went too far? Or are they doing a good job of setting it up so that you expect it to continually get worse? I know that Sal from Comic Pop decided to stop watching the show past season 2 already because it was already amping up its stuff. I remember he watched season 1. He said it's not really for him because of the way they portrayed the superheroes. And then he heard stuff happening in season 2 and said he's done with the show already. So if that's already happened with Sal, I wonder how many more people have dropped off.
When Mother's Milk gets scarred for life.
Or when, we're having a character who's swapping between male and female, because that's the stopping point for a lot of people for a different reason. Is The Boys just going to keep creating more and more topics to get hashtags and get talked about? Or is it going to kind of level out? The problem I see with it is that it's going to keep ramping up and we're going to hit a season 7 Walking Dead moment where you're just going to lose half your audience and we're never going to get to that peak again. But what do you think? I can't really harp on it much more. I've already told you I'm a fan. I'm a fan of The Boys. I found the comic okay. I didn't find it to be that incredible. I also said I was going to answer why we didn't put it up on the channel. It's simple. I made the video. It exists. It went on our Patreon. And YouTube immediately demonetized and blacklisted it. So we never got it out on YouTube. That's the exact reason. That's why we've never truly covered The Boys here on the channel, because the only attempt we've ever made, which was the entirety of Volume 1, it lived for 1 hour and YouTube demonetized it and restricted it and blacklisted it. It was like not for kids restriction, no monetization, which if you don't know how YouTube works, if it's not monetized, it just doesn't get sent out to people. And it was restricted in like half the country. So we were like, all right, we run into that problem with some Wolverine videos, but normally we can clean up the Wolverine stuff and then put it out. I couldn't clean up The Boys. If I cleaned up The Boys, it would be like that one time I cleaned up Spawn and you all got mad at me. So I was like, we're just not doing The Boys. But anyway, what do you think? You think The Boys is going to jump that big marker there? I don't know. I don't know what it's going to do. I hope it doesn't. I want it to stay good. I don't want it to get to a point where I'm bored of it. But I want to know your opinion of The Boys in Gen V. And are you liking Gen V? Because I really like what they're doing in Gen V. Anyway, I'm Benny. This is The Problem With. Don't forget to check out our sponsor today, the Kickstarter for Zorro. And I will see you next time right here with another thing that I get to nitpick.